Funding for the Gone Fishin' Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.
Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, July 8th, 2024. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. And we thank our friends at the Energy Communities Alliance for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. ECA, Local Concerns, National Impact. If you haven't subscribed to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, we invite you to do that now. Every so often, we're privileged to be able to speak to the Chief Executive Officer of a major contractor leading a key portion of the DOE Environmental Cleanup Program. These discussions are always interesting and illuminating. They give us valuable insight into the perspective and thought process of leaders whose job is to ensure that cleanup happens on time, within budget, and most importantly, safely. It's a big picture view that helps us see clearly one more piece of the puzzle that forms the cleanup mission. It's usually an intimate one-on-one conversation with a busy executive who is driven to succeed for his company and for the nation. Today, we will spend some quality time with just such an executive. Our guest is John Eschenberg, President and Chief Executive Officer of Central Plateau Cleanup Company in Hanford, Washington. An Amentum-led partnership with Fluor and Atkins, CPCC is responsible for managing site operations, facility deactivation, decommissioning, decontamination and demolition, waste site remediation, and transuranic waste management on Hanford's Central Plateau and along the Columbia River corridor. It's a challenging and hazardous assignment and a large part of what many have called the biggest environmental cleanup project in the world. Of the remaining 15 cleanup projects in the DOE-EM portfolio, Hanford is by far the most demanding, likely to stretch for more than 50 years into the future. Thousands of workers will be needed over that time to finish the job. That number growing as the site moves to 24/7 operations with planned startup of the waste treatment and immobilization plant that will turn the site's liquid waste into glass. Let's meet John Eschenberg, who talks about some of the efforts being undertaken today to ensure that a future workforce is available, trained, and ready for the difficult task ahead. John has announced plans to leave his current post at the end of July to accept a yet-to-be-announced executive position with Amentum, CPCC's parent company. In a memo to employees, John said putting the K-East reactor in long-term storage was a highlight of his time at CPCC, along with prioritizing the safety and growth of the workforce and supporting education and nonprofits in the Tri-Cities community. Earlier, as CEO at Washington River Protection Solutions, John oversaw startup of the tank-side cesium removal system that is pre-treating tank waste for vitrification. We wish John well and thank him for his contributions to the Hanford cleanup over a 13-year period, as well as his support for this podcast. Well, our guest today is John Eschenberg. John is the president and CEO of the Central Plateau Cleanup Company in Hanford. And welcome to the podcast, John.
Mike, glad to be here with you today.
Well, we're very glad to have you. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's start by talking about you a little bit. You have a very impressive career in the Department of Energy complex that covers a lot of bases. I know you before you took this current job, you were in charge and led another major contractor at Hanford. Can you just give us a little bit about the history of your career in the DOE complex?
Yeah, happy to. As I've had some time to reflect on this, I've been in the nuclear industry now for 37 years. It's hard for me to believe. I put my first TLD on when I was 19 years old, and I've been very fortunate in this career. I've got to see all aspects of our country's nuclear industry. Fair amount of time in the DOE complex, Mike, as you mentioned. I work for a number of private companies, Brown and Root Environmental, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Actually worked for the Department of Energy as an executive in three of their major programs, the Office of Science, National Security, and then the Office of Environmental Management. So it's been a very rich experience for me at an early part of my career. I got to see and do and meet lots of people that I feel very fortunate about. So it's been really rewarding to me. Now, I've been at the Central Plateau Cleanup Company for about 2 years now, and my prior assignment was at also here in Hanford with Washington River Protection Solutions, where I was there about 4.5 years. Very fortunate to work with that team, really helped advance the mission. In a greater part of my adult life, as I reflected on this, I've spent now 13 years working at Hanford in 2 separate assignments, and about as many years working on DOE's high-level waste disposition mission. So it's been really, feel very fortunate to be part of one of the department's highest priority missions.
Well, you've covered a lot of bases, and you know the complex well, and you are at CPCC now as the president and CEO. Can you tell us what the mission of CPCC is in terms of the environmental cleanup program?
Yeah, sure thing. So the Central Plateau Cleanup Company took over in January of 2021. And just at the top line, our key objectives are, first and foremost, is to protect the Columbia River, reduce the hazards to our workforce and to the environment. We want to reduce the active footprint at the Hanford site. The Hanford site's 580 square miles, half the size of Rhode Island. The industrial footprint covers about half of that. And our goal is to continue to compress and shrink that industrial footprint. Ultimately, we would like to be somewhere on the order of 10 to 20 square miles as a long-term objective. So, reducing that active footprint is really something that we're focused on. And then lastly, we're here to support the broader high-level waste mission here at the Hanford site. The pathway to cleanup runs through disposition of the high-level waste. We all know we've got over 56 million gallons of the high-level waste stored in 177 underground storage tanks. We've got to get that waste dispositioned, and it's really a critical time, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about my personal assessment of where we are in that program. But Central Plateau Cleanup Company does play a key role in the direct feed low activity waste disposition mission, in that we're the ultimate recipient of the classified waste form. And so that's, we're proud to be a part of that part of the mission.
Well, we're going to be focusing on workforce development today, and I'd like to start that part of the conversation, but just asking you, how many employees do you have now at CPCC?
So in round numbers, we've got around 2,000 employees all in, 1,600 I'll call organic employees, and plus or minus about 400 subcontractors that help us depending on what phase of the work activities we're involved with. So it's a good mid-sized company. And Mike, one of the key challenges for us, to be candid with you, since we took over in January of 2021, like most parts of the nuclear industry, we've had a pretty significant turnover of our employees. Now we'll touch on that a little later on, I hope, but because I want to talk to you about some of the broader challenges in attracting the next generation of our workforce. Mm-hmm. But one of our key selling points, and we really try to leverage this as we work really hard to build the next generation of our workforce. You think about the nobility of the mission that the Hanford site serves. And I say there's nobility here. Just a quick history lesson. When you reflect back, 80 years ago, it all started here at Hanford. The plutonium production mission started here at Hanford. And that mission enabled our country to first win World War II. And then ultimately, by the late 80s, we had won the Cold War. And so that, when you frame it like that, the national significance of the Hanford site, and now over the last 30 years, this dedicated effort on cleaning up this large industrial site, there's a great deal of nobility in that mission. And it's the connection of the cleanup mission with the early manufacturing mission to win the war efforts. That just, it brings chills to me, because that connection and national significance is something that's important not only to myself, but to all of our employees and our prospective employees. So we do try to leverage this, the nobility of the mission, not only for the significance that and the impact that it makes to the local community, the Tri-Cities, but more broadly, the state of Washington, and then most broadly to our country. We're just down to, a little more than a dozen cleanup sites left around the complex, our country. It just so happens Hanford is the biggest, and it'll take the longest because the challenge here is significant. But that nobility in the mission and being protective of and stewards of a large piece of Washington State, and sort of this the relationship with the tribes and the community. So all of those things come together. The work that CPCCo does and what we really sell as we work to build the next generation of our workforce is just that. It's the nobility of the mission. And Mike, if I might, let me just talk through a couple of the key things that we're focused on here. I talked about, we protecting the Columbia River and supporting the direct feed low activity waste mission. Let me kind of unpack that a little bit. One of the things that we're charged with is, when I talk about protecting the Columbia River, the Hanford site has over 50 miles of shoreline. Over 50 miles, so that's pretty doggone significant, including the last free-flowing section of the Columbia River, the lifeblood of the Pacific Northwest. Another part of our focus is on reducing risk in the central part of the site. We call it the Central Plateau, where we are working to stabilize and then demolish the remaining industrial infrastructure. And since the cleanup activities have started here at the Hanford site, we've dispositioned over 950 facilities. We've got a few to go, and of course they're the big ones and the hard ones, like the 4 operating chemical separations canyons. A large part of our work efforts here are focused on groundwater and treating the groundwater. Over 2.2 billion gallons of groundwater we treat each year. A small team, we've got 6 ground water treatment facilities. But that's an enormous amount of volume, 2.2 billion gallons of water treated through our systems. We've got a longer term objective to disposition the transuranic waste. Here, there's some processing and some separations activities that are required, but then ultimately we want to disposition that component of the waste that's stored on the Hanford site down to New Mexico at the waste isolation pilot plant. Mike, I'll tell you that I'm very honored to do this because I was able to touch this program when I was in Oak Ridge once upon a time. But we've been given the responsibility to be the stewards of our country's 409th national park, and that's the B Reactor Museum. And for those that have not been in the B Reactor, if you ever do visit the Hanford site, please do carve out 2, 3, 4 hours of your day. You get a nice bus ride over. The museum is fantastic. Our guys have done a fantastic job to make your visiting experience very rich. And it really gives you a sense of where did it all start. So we're as pleased as we can be to be focused on just that, stewards of that national park. And just, the last couple of things I mentioned earlier, our support to the direct feed low activity waste program, which has really gotten a lot of traction over the last 5 years. We've got both melters, one of our colleague companies on site. We've got both melters at the operating temperature now. And, it's within our near-term sites to begin making radioactive glass and dispositioning the low activity waste stream. And our part in that, again, we will handle all the waste and for ultimate disposition. So that's just kind of the thumbnail sketch, Mike, of, sort of this broader, it's a bit of a sales pitch, to be honest with you. And that is, we're really working hard to attract that next generation of our workforce. And the big part of that is making them feel part of the family that we have here, but also impressing upon them that their work efforts really do have a local, a state, and a national level of significance. So when they get in the car to drive home at the end of the day, they ought to feel really proud about their contributions to our country.
Well, you've given us a great overview of the activities there, and that's very helpful. We appreciate that very much. In talking about the workforce, do you have enough employees now to do the job, to accomplish the mission that you have there? Or are you constantly in a recruiting mode and looking for people?
It's more of the latter. As we stand today, our workforce is very stable. We've got the workforce we need to do the work in front of us. But our workforce had become, I'll say, a lot more senior. 3 years ago, the median age on site was 56 years old. Today, the median age on site throughout all ranks in our workforce is in the middle 40s. So we're starting to make that transition, and those folks that were in their middle 50s, late 50s, early 60s, they had just reached the natural end of their working career. They'd been at Hanford for nearly 40 years. Just to reflect back, in the early 80s, under Reagan's first administration, he really staffed up the defense machine in our country. And that then caused the hires at Hanford to really increase 40 years ago. But now so many of those folks met the natural end of their working career and they retired. So it's an ever-present challenge, but it's very manageable, due in part to some of the initiatives that we've put into place. But as I may have mentioned earlier, over 50% of the workforce that we had on day one have since retired or moved on. And so our restaffing plan and our restaffing efforts have had to be very aggressive to make sure that we can continue to meet the mission needs here at Hanford.
When you're in the recruitment phase, what kinds of people are you looking for mostly? Is there one one or two areas that cause you the most concern, or where your greatest needs are, and are these people, who are the people that are hardest to find?
Well, difficult question. We need people in all skills and all disciplines. We always tend to focus on, well, you need engineers. Well, that's true. We do need engineers, but we also need pipe fitters. We need nuclear chemical operators. We need health physics technicians. We need industrial hygiene technicians. We need work planners. We need accountants. We need auditors. We need purchasing agents. So our need is very broad, and it transcends this notion of just the sort of the customary technical fields. But we run a pretty big enterprise here, and all of the skills and all of the trades and all the craft, that's what we need. That's what we will continue to recruit.
You have a lot of responsibilities as the CEO. Where does workforce development and worker recruitment fit among your priorities?
Yeah, so for me, it's right at the top. It's one of my top 5 focus points. We spent a lot of time developing internships and cooperative employment experiences. We've worked really closely with our local community college and the local state university. It's called Washington State University, Tri-Cities. I sit on their advisory council. We are actively engaged with both learning institutions. And the objective there is to set career pipelines and pathways for our graduating students. Many of the students that graduate from the local schools, they are first generation college students. And so that's very rewarding to see that happen. They've gone to school, they've graduated, and then we bring them into our workplace. But our internship program, each year we bring on somewhere between 20 to 30 interns. And our cooperative employment experience, we bring on an equal amount of students or cooperative employees. And that's really been a rich experience for us. To have these interns and co-ops. Our retention rate for co-ops in particular is very high. Not only do the co-ops and the interns, do they embed themselves in real work and our day-to-day work cadence, but they also get paid. And it's a wonderful opportunity for some of the senior members of our staff and our team to engage and mentor the interns and the co-ops, and that's really our opportunity to set the hook with them and get them hooked on doing this line of work. It's important work for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, but it's also it's a good point of entry into an industrial work environment, because there is no other place to better learn the rigors and discipline required in a work environment that's highly regulated than beginning with the nuclear industry. So, Mike, I just want to maybe brag a little bit here. We have our company, Central Plateau Cleanup Company, along with my old company, Washington River Protection Solutions. We have engaged with the local university and established a lecture series, both in the engineering department and in the business department, where we send our professional staff over, and they'll have a series of lectures over the semester. And also there's some involvement with the capstone projects. So, that involvement with our local institutes of higher learning, it's more than superficial. We have a number of our staff who are adjunct professors at Columbia Basin College, for example. So we really are putting a lot of effort and commitment behind supporting these local schools and ultimately to help build the next generation of our workforce.
Well, I would, looking at the DOE complex nationally, I think the outside observer would see that these sites are attractive places to work. They have steady work, they have good employment, good benefits, good wages. Do you find that you're in a good position to recruit and attract workers at Hanford and at CPCC?
We are. I'll tell you what I think we do really well. We do really well at local recruiting. Most of our recruits are from the region. In fact, many of them are second and third generation Hanford employees, legacy employees. We are working more broadly to how do we broaden that net, and how do we have a more aggressive nationwide recruitment campaign? You know, we do, like I said, we do a really good job in the community in Washington State. We do a pretty good job in the Pacific Northwest region. We do a decent job. But I think that there's an opportunity for us to really to go after a more aggressive nationwide recruiting opportunity. And I think, you know, like all things that we do, we always begin with the end in mind. And that is, of course, we want to establish our next generation of workers to support the Central Plateau Cleanup Company. But I think more broadly, and this is one of our governing principles, we want to get them into the nuclear industry. And as the cleanup work gets done, and the cleanup work will get done, then there are other industry opportunities for the skill set. And whether it be transferring over to the waste treatment and immobilization plant, whether it be transferring to the modern pit manufacturing facility in South Carolina, whether it be transferring to a national lab, there are a number of opportunities within the Department of Energy's enterprise, but more broadly, and given the interest and national significance actually of the next generation or new nuclear initiatives, we're building a skilled and qualified workforce that is ready to be redeployed to that next national calling. If it's, you know, modification of our country's electrification system, or if it's new and innovative ways to create and generate power like new nuclear, we've got a workforce that's got the underlying skill sets to go make that happen.
You have something there called the One Hanford concept, which basically calls for seamless operation among the various contractors that you have on site operationally. Does that same concept apply to recruiting? Do you work together? Do you have a kind of a shared approach to recruitment among contractors on site?
We do, and that's you know, we're all the contractor leadership here. We're very passionate about the One Hanford concept, and it's been very fulfilling for me to see all of the 6 prime contractors on the Hanford site really come together to be synchronized, to be aligned in our decision making and our prioritization. We all have the same shared objective. We all serve a different part in this ecosystem, but we all have one objective. So, you know, there's power in numbers and there's power in unity. And under the One Hanford approach, that's really enabled us to leverage, I'll say, our collective buying power. In this case, our collective recruiting power, to bring on that next generation of our workforce. Our skill sets are always a little bit different, but they're enough alike where we can have, one recruiting effort. So for example, when we go to large trade shows like the Waste Management Conference, our recruiting booth has the One Hanford billboard on it. So the Department of Energy for the federal staff, along with all of the prime contractors, we're all there in the collective, working our best to recruit, to make that next recruitment. And whoever they elect to go to work for, it's a win for one prime is a win for all of us. So we do work very collectively and collaboratively with our colleagues here on site, because again, we've all got that shared objective.
Much of the focus at Hanford today is on the startup of the waste treatment and immobilization facility. As that facility becomes operational, will your workforce needs change? Will you need more people or different kinds of people?
Yeah, our workforce will change, and it will continue to evolve. As you can imagine, there's different phases of cleanup here on the Hanford site. Each of those phases does have a series of specialty skill sets, but we all have a core competency. And that core competency is something that we will continue to rely on from now until the end of processing operations. The others, the specialty skill sets, there's an opportunity for us, and we've actually done a fair amount of this. We call it upskilling and reskilling. So we've got the opportunity and really the responsibility to upskill and reskill our workforce. I look at it like this. We've made a significant investment in recruiting, in the hiring process, and the training process for all of our employees, irrespective of how they contribute. And so that becomes a really nice baseline for us. We work really hard to inculcate the culture that we need to be successful in a high hazard industrial facility or a high hazard industrial setting, and then a nuclear setting. So that, there's a significant investment that's been made in our workforce for each individual phase as we are on the cleanup journey. So I think that we will continue to evolve the skill sets. Technology will drive that alone. Changes in technology, cleanup technologies, or just changes in technologies, period. That will drive a certain demand for upskilling and reskilling and going to get new skill sets just to stay current. But I think we've got a really good plan for that. One of the biggest changes, I talk about culture, and that the biggest cultural shift will be when the WTP becomes operable, fully operable, direct feed low activity waste. That's a 24/7 operation. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The melters don't get a day off. And that's a bit of a cultural adaptation. It's about setting new expectations for our workforce. And it's about there's lifestyle changes that will be required. And that new culture and this new operating cadence, that's going to be our next big step to take. We do have some facilities today that operate on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But when you look at the entirety of our enterprise and the Hanford ecosystem, where if I have a facility that's out of service, that will affect the direct feed low activity waste facility's ability to process waste. This ecosystem is very interconnected and highly interdependent. And that's why, this notion of, the one Hanford, all the contractors are seamless. I understand what our colleagues' challenges are at the WTP. I understand what our colleagues' challenges are at the tank farm contracts or the site integrator contract. And we all have to come together. It has to be seamless, because if you have one part of that ecosystem that's out of service, it affects everything else in the system. And we won't be successful until we can absolutely come together as one.
John, for people who are watching or listening to this podcast who may have an interest in a career in environmental cleanup in the nuclear industry, what advice would you give them to be able to successfully apply for jobs now and in the future?
Just at the top line, for me, I think one of the single greatest attributes of any employee is their ability to be flexible and agile. In our line of work, it's very dynamic, and the work fronts often change. And so this notion of being agile and flexible in the workplace is a highly desirable characteristic for me. I think, for our new recruits and the next generation of our workforce, the basic academic skill set is important. And most people will turn up with the basic academic skill set. And whether it be an academic skill set or whether it be skills, craft, or trades, we're only going to hire the people that have a base level of that skill set, whether it be academic or whether it be skills based. But the distinguishing factors for all of us, agility, flexibility, we need people who are good communicators. They're good communicators in writing. They're good communicators orally. This willingness to be mobile is also a virtue, particularly as we go with a broader nationwide recruiting campaign. This work is new to a lot of people, working in an industrial setting, let alone a high hazard industrial setting, let alone a nuclear setting. Most of the folks that we onboard, they come to us, they don't have the requisite skill set. That means, and I have the fortune, every new employee that comes to our company, I make a point to meet them, understand their background. And 9 out of 10 of our new hires, they come to us with no industrial experience and no nuclear experience. They've been in other parts of the market, whether they're school teachers, selling cars, they were in retail, food service, Lamb Wesson, coming out of the ag industry. So, we're looking for people who meet these attributes: flexible, agile. They're good working in small teams. We're looking for people that have a degree of emotional intelligence. And that is that they become good team members. They are easily assimilated into our work teams. They're committed to working in a very disciplined, rigorous environment. And Mike, to be honest with you, at least in our line of work, this work isn't for everybody, because a lot of it is very physical. A lot of it is outside. As most people know, the environmental conditions at Hanford can be very extreme. There are cold winters. There are hot summers. Now we've got a lot of inside jobs too, but you really have to have a level of hardiness and willingness to really dig in and be committed to this, working in an industrial setting. It's high hazard, where the expectations of performance and accountability are very, very, very high.
Well, John, as we close out our conversation today, I wonder if you could give us your assessment of the status of cleanup at Hanford. This is this is probably the biggest, most complex, most challenging cleanup operation in the entire DOE complex and indeed in the country as a whole. How do you feel like it's going? Is it going well? Are you meeting the challenges? What's your assessment?
Well, I'll say this in a non chest pounding way, but I feel as though I've earned the right to make this assessment to answer your question. Been at Hanford for 13 years. I first came in 2003 and was able to do the first concrete placement at the low activity waste building. That was done in 2003. And, here we are 20 years later, and we have come so far in the journey to initiate treatment of high level waste. One view would say, well, gosh, that's 20 years. It is 20 years. But what we're doing here on the Hanford site is a world-class challenge, world-class technology. It requires world-class contractors, world-class people. But we have an enormous amount of traction now. We have clear line of sight. We've all got clear goals and objectives. We're unified as a team. And in my assessment, those are all the ingredients needed for the Hanford cleanup mission to be successful. And I think you see it over and over, at least over the last 5 years. Our Congress and the taxpayers, they're beginning to see that their tax dollars are being, put to good use here. Our Congress has a high level of confidence now, a restored level of confidence that we're on a pathway to initiate treatment. Our out-year pathway to tackle the high-level waste portion of the waste has been clearly delineated. So I'm very bullish, Mike, on where we are. It's just been an honor for me to be a part of it, to be associated with the WTP in the early part of my career, the tank farms in recent part, and now at a completely different perspective, doing cleanup and risk reduction on the balance of the Hanford Reservation. All of those things serve the same mission objective, and that is we have got to get the high level waste stabilized. And so I'm very bullish. I think the next 10, 12, 15 months, we will continue to demonstrate success to the stakeholders. And it's just been an honor to be a part of the program.
John Eschenberg, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Central Plateau Cleanup Company in Hanford, Washington. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mike.
Funding for the Gone Fishin' Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.